Yo, what's up, guys? It's your boy Franklin here, and today I wanted to make a, somewhat of a different video. I had some battle videos in the background, ready to be uploaded, but because Crown Tundra is like right around the corner, like literally as I'm making this video a couple days away, I decided to, maybe we should do a different video instead of doing battles or even doing showdown. We're gonna save that for the Crown Tundra metagame once that's formed and all the quick bans are out of the way. I think making a good Pokemon tier list might be a pretty good option here. Pretty good timing too before the Crown Tundra. Um, I know I've seen some pretty interesting and pretty questionable tier lists since Sword and Shield was dropped, and I wanted to make my own tier list. So I'm gonna take an unconventional route and simply create tiers here instead of having lettered tiers. I just put amazing, good, meh, bad. Keeps it pretty, pretty simple. That way, because oftentimes with grade lettered tier list, the differentiation between B and a C is like, okay, is it B good? Is what is it? I mean, D's and F's. I mean, D and F is essentially the same thing. If they're bad or terrible, they're essentially the same thing. There's no such thing as a bad and terrible game. It's just terrible or bad. Period. Or it doesn't meet up the standards of, to the consumers, which is the player's base. And obviously, amazing is the games that like defined the generation. Like it basically super exceeded the expectations of fans. So let's get right into it. So starting, let's go from generation 1 all the way to 8th in numerical order. So we have pretty much the original generations here. I'm gonna put the Game Boy games here. There's no. Okay, so there is no green because I think that was Japanese only. I First gen pretty good. A lot of people say they're bad, but they're using that much more so in a retrospective opinion. In hindsight, these games when they were released launched the popularity of Pocket Monsters at the time, when translated into Japanese. These games pretty much shot the Game Boy Color through the atmosphere and introduced Pokemon pretty much to the Western culture, and obviously that had a very very instrumental impact on video games and in the industry, in merchandise as well, and spun an anime out of it. So, and all three so far, and the trading card game as well, and that has been pretty successful ever since. They were pretty good during that time, and looking back on the legacy of those games, they've been pretty damn good. Now, obviously, if you were playing the more recent games, you look back at these games, you're like, what the hell is this? They were pretty good, pretty good. So not much for Generation One. It basically is the foundation of what Pokemon is today, and you got to put some respect on it. All right, next up we got Generation Two. All right, so we got Gold, Silver, and Crystal, and I see Crystal. These two pretty much are good. They follow up very good a sequel to Generation One, and I'm gonna put Crystal right around the same as well. These games introduced Night and Day, which obviously had a significant impact on the evolutions of Eevee into Espeon and Umbreon, and we had moving sprites in Crystal for the first time. So it was a very for a sequel. These games were pretty damn good, and if I'm not mistaken, they really um, gave more life into the Generation 1 games. Obviously, they're using the same 8-bit format of the style for Generations 1 and 2, but Generation 2 brought a little more color. They brought a little more characteristics and features into the Pokemon, and very good sequel for what Generation 1 had in store. Moving on to Generation 3. Ruby and Sapphire. Hot take, I think they're meh. Now, the reason why I think these two are meh is because while Generation 3 introduced some pretty popular Pokemon this generation, like Salamence, Metagross, the Lottie twins. Very interesting designs and Regirock and all those and the Reggie family, whatever. Rayquaza, Kyogre, Groudon. The story of this game is kind of lackluster, especially in these games where, in comparison to Emerald, they were considered incomplete. Because after you run through the story, there is no post story, which Generation Two kind of solved that, and especially with Crystal. And I do think that Pokemon, although these two were the most, I think they're the highest selling Pokemon games on the Game Boy Advance, which is pretty crazy. Um, there seems to be a lackluster of story context, a post story. We're definitely missing. Like once you run through Hoenn, it just does. You're pretty much done. There isn't much to do, and yes, there's introduced secret bases which you can battle people online and all that, and there's contests here as well. But it missed something. It was missing some kind of formation. And by the way, this game went back to having no animations comparison to Gen 2 of Crystal, which obviously was the latest game. And wow, we definitely missed that. And then a couple years later, Emerald shows up, and it is an amazing. Now I have a little bit of bias with Emerald because I'm gonna say it now. It was my first Pokemon game ever. You guys probably have known that already. That I owned, not played, but owned, and it fixed a lot of stuff that Ruby and Sapphire had. We had animations back. We had a Dex Nav. So essentially, you can not Dex Nav, but I forgot what it's called in the original game. But you can basically rebattle people for higher level caps, which means you can train Pokemon faster and faster, especially the gym leaders, which I think is pretty good. And we also had obviously one of the biggest features ever in a Pokemon game, which is the Battle Frontier, the original Battle Frontier. And we were able to compete in different formats. You get to get rewarded for this. You get the gold and silver symbols, which obviously the more symbols you are, you basically are a beast. You get to catch Rayquaza plus and any one of the legendaries. And Rayquaza actually had a story. It actually was involved in the plot because it is the savior between the war of water and land, or Team Aqua and Team Magma, which by the way they're not not really a good antagonistic team, but I can say that for another video. Emerald also introduced different generation Pokemon. The Safari Zone was updated to after you complete the main game, you can get Pokemon from Generation 2. You got the Lotties roaming around, and which obviously that was from Generation. I mean, it's from Ruby and Sapphire as well. But Emerald solved a lot of the content issues that the Ruby and Sapphire versions lacked. And I think it's an amazing game. I think if you were to start your Generation 3 adventure, you can skip these two and go straight to Emerald because Emerald is a bit of a mix of both worlds and then some, which it's amazing. I think it's a very amazing experience for Generation 3. And a lot of people don't like Generation 3 due to that context or the design of some Pokemon, but Emerald solves a lot of those issues in terms of content. It just brings on more. It's kind of like a 2-for-1 deal. It's kind of like a 2-for-1 deal, and then you get another one for free. That's what I like to call it. Emerald is just beautiful. Fire Red and Leaf Green, the official remakes of Generation 1. The very first ones. These two were pretty good because not only you get to go through not only well, I was about to about to go crazy there. Not only were you able to pretty much go through Kanto again on Game Boy Advance rather than the Game Boy Color, you get to go to the Sevi Islands. And the Sevi Islands where you get a lot of Generation 2 Pokemon. And the experience of seeing Kanto on a 2D platform, not on an 8-bit, was pretty damn good. Obviously, they're supposed to reflect more of, Kanto rather than the experiences from Generation 3, Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald, even though they're on the same handheld console. They have their own unique charm. And Going through the Elite Four again, rematches, higher level caps means you can train easier. Champion gets a lot harder. I always love that step up of challenges. Like at least increase the level cap to the point where it actually does become a challenge. And I think this was the first Elite Four where I was like, whoa, what the heck's going on? I was somewhat under leveled. Not really. I was a little over leveled, but they still gave me a hard time because they're pretty damn good. Gary, really good rival. Doesn't care about you. Always making condescending or backhanded compliments to you. And unlike Generation 3, and Generation 1 in Fire Red and Leaf Green, the rival is actually a rival. He's not helping you out. He's not giving me items. He's not, telling me what to do. He's my rival. He don't give a damn about me. um Again, adding more content to an existing game and remaking the game is already a good step in the right direction. And I think Fire Red and Leaf Green were the perfect remakes, even though I kind of wish they had implemented the Johto region in these games. But obviously, we're going to touch base on the fourth generation games when Heart Gold and Soul Silver will be dropped in this tier list. And speaking of fourth generation, we have Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. I think Diamond and Pearl are pretty good. Sinnoh unfortunately had some issues with pacing, and I do think that Diamond and Pearl, in terms of the region itself, the main region is kind of lackluster, but it makes up for it with events, event Pokemon, the post story, and pretty much the quality of certain Pokemon. And what I mean by that is the event Pokemon got their own story. This is the one of the first games where these Pokemon actually have an item you get to unlock, and you go through an entire story, and it's a really good story. Darkrai, good story. Shaman, good story. Arceus, although it was not obtainable at the time, good story, and good event leading up to it. And that's a lot of and those kind of stories or slash sequences in the game were definitely missed from the future generation of games of six events, generation 6 and onward. I don't know what Game Freak was planning or were thinking of how they were going to do events. And then we have Platinum, and Platinum is on the top of the list with Emerald. And Platinum solves the pacing issues, the slow animation issues with Diamond and Pearl. And then it adds on more Pokemon. It adds a Battle Frontier, which this one, not really like the Generation 3 Battle Frontier, but it's still incredible anyways. And you get a lot more content. And again, this is a recurring theme. If these games have a sister game that not only enhances the game and then adds more content, it's already an amazing game. And I think the general consensus is that Platinum doesn't really need a lot of explanation as to why it's an amazing game. I think a lot of people will agree that Platinum, general consensus is that it's a pretty amazing game. It adds a more revolutionary story to Giratina, which in Diamond and Pearl, it kind of didn't really have a story. It was just there in Distortion Cave, not world, cave. But in Platinum, it got its own storyline, and it actually messed with the antagonist. I think Diamond and Pearl actually had, the fourth generation had one of the better antagonists in Cyrus. Not the Team Galactic, but Cyrus himself was a pretty emotionalist maniac because he wanted to destroy an entire universe and build a new universe where he considers everything to be his. That's fucking crazy. Pretty much it's impossible, obviously, but he was that close. He was that close to to get his goal. And the character development of Barry himself, who's technically supposed to be your quote unquote rival, is actually a really good character development. And I always love to see character development of characters that aren't you or aren't your side hoe or your side chick, whatever you want to call it. So Diamond and Pearl, good games, lack some pacing, Pretty good region overall. Snow, very phenomenal snow region. Platinum just, and again, it enhances your experience in the Sinnoh region and then adds more stuff and solves a lot of issues. On to Generation 5. Oh no, 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 no. We forgot about these. The Kings right here, Generation 4. Heart Gold and Soul Silver. I don't really need to explain why they're S. You get two regions in one. That's pretty much your reason why you should get these games. And as a matter of fact, if you do not play Generations 1 and 3, I suggest Generations 1 or 2 from the Game Boy Color or even the Game Boy Advance, I recommend getting these games here. These are very enhanced versions of the, Johto and Kanto regions, and it's phenomenal. Very, very good. Obviously, using the same engine as Diamond and Pearl and Platinum, these are pretty good. Actually, I'm sorry, they're amazing overall. I don't really need to explain much, but damn, I really recommend the amazing games. I feel like I would recommend these games to anyone if they want to start their Pokemon adventure somewhere. And I've been hitting home. You get your generations 1, 2 here. You got generation 3 in Emerald, and you got Platinum as 4. So far so good. Um, Black and White. Do I need to say more about these? They're pretty good. I can't put them in amazing because their sequels, Black and White 2, were pretty freaking phenomenal. So Black and White was pretty much the first time where the general consensus that the antagonist was actually reasonable. N was a very good character that had a lot of development. Team Plasma was not as crazy as Team Galactic, but they had pretty good reasoning behind their actions. Um, the region here is very vibrant compared to a lot of the other regions. You get obviously these were based around Unova regions based around New York City or inner city, and then rural, towns and all that. A pretty vibrant region, and I will say connectivity on Black and White and Generation 5 in general in terms of trading and battling, this is where it ramped up. The GTS, yeah, it was, creating Generation 4 and battling as well, but Generation 5 took it to a new level. It made more accessible for battling, and this is where the battle scene of Pokemon was largely taking shape. And if you go back into, let's say YouTube, it's a pretty massive platform. The good chunk of the one of the better battling experiences was in Generation 5. Generation 2, and I forgot to put, oh, I did put them here. Black and White 2 pretty much solidified, again, a very good experience and added more content. You get the World Tournament where you get to face previous leaders. You get to see a fusion Pokemon for the first time in the franchise's history, and it's just an incredible experience overall. Obviously, you're not playing as the same main characters from Black and White, which is kind of strange, but it's a time skip essentially. Um, Time skip, but with new trainers, of course. But you get to not only go back into the Unova region, but then you get to experience what happened 2 years after. The remnants of Team Plasma, how Zekrom and Reshiram are affected by Kyurem now, which, again, it's a sister or a third legendary of the main cover ones that has its own story. And pretty good experience. And the soundtrack of Generation 5 is out of this world. Now, soundtracks in Pokemon are pretty nostalgic for me, and they've always been pretty good. But Generation 5, man, you got some bangers. You got End's final theme. Team Plasma was pretty popping. You got Driftvale City. Oh my goodness, the list can go on and on with these bangers that they have as, as what a Pokemon game's music should be. And it's beautiful. It is just an orgasm to your ears. Anyways, Generation 6, XY, the introduction of Pokemon into the 3D world. I think they were meh at the time, and I still think they're kind of meh because, again, these were games where they were missing a lot of stuff. There was no Battle Frontier. Actually, I'm sorry. I want to say that for ORAS. X and Y was like there wasn't a lot. We got new Pokemon, but I think this was the lowest amount of Pokemon that were added into a generation. I think it was less than 100. I believe. I'm not 100%. Yeah. In terms of like the Pokemon, like we didn't receive a lot of interesting Pokemon outside of probably like Greninja or Aegislash. The very popular Pokemon. Obviously, this was the introduction of Mega Evolutions, and Mega Evolutions changed the game the way we play Pokemon. Enhanced versions of the beasts that we already had. But the experience and my personal experience in X and Y was pretty man. I ran through the game pretty quickly, even though there was a new fairy type. And to be honest with you, if you had to tell me who are name me, if I had to, if you asked me name me three gym leaders from X and Y, I can't tell you. And I only know Ramos because he's like the first one, the grass type. If he even is the first one, it's just forgettable. It's just a forgettable experience. Kalos had, it's obviously based on France, and it should have been a more memorable game for anyone. But it's just a lot of stuff was forgettable overall. On Pokemon designs wise, it was okay. Some of them are pretty interesting. Compared to Generation 5, they're a little better. I will admit that. Kalos region is somewhat empty. And yeah, we get to ride Pokemon here now and then in the game. The Elite Four was forgettable as well. They're just, man, there was just something about these games where I just can't remember a lot of stuff. And that to me is yikes. And Team Flare, wow, they're not a good antagonistic team. And I'm only putting it as man because they were not the region itself and Generation 6 was not a bad experience for me. But it was just forgettable. Oras, I will put them as man as well. They're pretty, in terms of remaking it into 3D, they're phenomenal. But again, they left out the Battle Frontier, which makes sense, I guess. The Delta episode should have been more than just a Deoxys and Zinnia fight. And this is as crazy as it sounds, Oraz, the meta game of Oraz is what was pretty much the only highlight. If you were playing Pokemon in Generation 6 Wi-Fi, this is where peak Wi-Fi battling was happening. Everyone and their mom wanted to get a capture card. But in terms of the expectations of these remakes in regards to the original Generation 3 games, outside of Mega Evolutions, outside of the 3D remaking of the game, it was just, again, I just feel like if there was a Delta Emerald, maybe these games would be elevated to a little more. But man, I feel like it was a missed opportunity. Now, like I said, I'm not saying that they're horrible games because they're not. They're definitely not. But in terms of remaking what the games are supposed to be, it was not handled correctly. But I did enjoy the nostalgic trip when I opened up Omega Ruby for the first time 4 years ago. And while in hindsight, they were okay over the years, they kind of didn't age well. The only like highlights of this would be the metagames we saw in Oras. They're pretty damn good. Pretty good time for battling. But other than that, wow, a lot of missed opportunities there. Next up, we got is Generation 7. I'm going to start off with the bad. These two, Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee, they're pretty bad because they lack the fundamentals of what Pokemon's all about. The fact that we cannot battle wild Pokemon and then capture it using, Joy-Cons or the Pokeball Plus, wow. That's a pretty big misstep. And I guess, yeah, it's for the casual fan base, which I get. I get that, I understand that. But yikes. These games, while they were graphically beautiful, there's a lot of missed mechanics. We got no Pokemon abilities, which I know they were trying to remake Gen 1, but this is the third, fourth time, pretty much, because we got one, two, um, technically, if you want to consider Crystal as a separate game, whatever, three. Um, this is your third or fourth time revisiting this region, and the fact that there are no abilities, there was no battling a wild Pokemon, no post story. I mean, battling other trainers with the Pokemon of the exact same dex number doesn't count. Very, 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 very bad game. Missing a lot of basic functionalities of what creates Pokemon as its own. What am I saying here? It lacks the functionalities of what makes a Pokemon game. Sure, these sold like hotcakes. It was on the Switch. Graphically on the Switch, it was very beautiful, but functionality and technical wise, the way battling works, the way Pokemon works, it was flawed. Really, really flawed. All right, we got that out of the way. Sun and Moon. Hot take. I think Sun and Moon are pretty good. Um, well, not that. Hold on. It should be this right here. Sun and Moon were pretty good because the story was actually decent. And the Pokemon, in regards to the region, they actually match to the region. A lot of the Pokemon seem like they belong there. Your rival, quote unquote, Hal is pretty too nice. Meh. But I think the story was pretty good. It definitely was a upgrade from Generation 6 story. I still think Generation 5 story is untouchable. But Sun and Moon was going in the right direction. We had a dex number of 400, which I believe is the biggest base dex that we actually got in this game, because obviously it's a later generation. So you can catch a lot of Pokemon. GTS was very, very functional at the time. Battling in Sun and Moon was phenomenal too. Very, very good busted legendaries in this generation as well. The Alolan experience for me was pretty good. You have different islands, and some of the islands, they were kind of like, some of them were slow paced, but just listen to the music and listen to how you adventure from island to island, and you shall see, especially when there's a day and night split. Oh man, some of these tracks at night, incredible. The first main city in the Alolan region, I forgot, was Howley City. Well, I forgot what. Completely forgot. I must have butchered that pronunciation, but incredible. There are some very good soundtracks on Generation 7, and overall it was a very good experience. More of a nostalgic trip for me if I ever to play these games again, which usually I don't. Like I said, Pokemon design wise were pretty damn good. It fits with the theme of the region, of a Hawaiian Polynesian culture, and you have Team Skull. And Team Skull, by the way, had done a pump fake on everyone, because everyone thought that Team Skull were the real bad guys. And then you had the Eighth Year Foundation, if you guys remember during the leak season, that there was something interesting about Lusamine and the Eighth Year Foundation. Their logo was kind of like, the they were kind of like type Null's head and all that. And there were a lot of theories going on. The Ultra Beast looking like some of the characters from Sun and Moon, and Team Skull was just there. They thought everyone was like phony and all that. They were pretty much cartoonish, but damn, they pumped faked you right there, didn't you? Didn't they? But yeah, Sun and Moon, pretty good. Ultra Sun and Moon, pretty bad, because this game was essentially not even an enhanced version. I wouldn't call it an enhanced version if the main games were essentially, you got move tutors, you got a couple different Pokemon, but your overall experience, besides going to a new area, which is the Ultra Space, wow, it falls. And I can't believe this was actually released a year later. This should have been DLC. And the only reason why I'm saying it's bad is because this should have been DLC. And Sun and Moon, while it was empty, at least it was your first time going there. And these failed to patch up the empty holes that these games had. It should not have been $40. Should have been probably like $5.99 DLC. Don't know why they didn't do that. Um, the story actually got worse. I think the story from the from Sun and Moon, the complex natures of Lucamine with her children, got replaced by Necrozma going wild, running wild, and it just was not a good story. Yikes again. And again, there was still it felt empty, man. Even though we got new mechanics, new Z crystals, we ended up getting new Pokemon, which was less than 10, I believe. It still felt like, yo, for a game that just came out a year ago, this is not really a good remake or not really a good sister games. And the fact you have to replay these over again to basically go on the same level of progress in Sun and Moon, yikes, that was pretty bad. Next we have is Sword and Shield. Now, Sword and Shield has a bit of controversy. We all know about, Dexit. We all know about the Pokemon that were cut out. The story, wow. Let's just start with Sword and Shield. While I do enjoy playing it on a competitive level, playing Wi-Fi it looks pretty good. Max raid battles are good. They changed up the formula of how you play Pokemon, how you catch those high rated Pokemon, and soon we're gonna have our second wave of DLC. These games lack quite a bit of stuff. Now, the positives, like I said, max raid battles, quality of Wi-Fi battles, quality of life into getting competitive. This is the first time where Game Freak was like, "Yo, if you want players to play Pokemon on a competitive level, let's just give them everything." We got mints, which we can change natures. That's a first. They ended up bringing back ability capsules. Well, obviously, pretty good. You end up having more accessibility to bottle caps and gold bottle caps, which is better than nothing, and still pretty good. You have the ability to transfer egg moves from parent to parent as long as they're from the same species and opposite gender. That's pretty damn good. And now in this generation in Crown Tundra, you get to change Pokemon's ability to a hidden ability, and that takes it up a notch. And wow, quality of life in terms of competitive scene, I think it's near flawless. We're about to see whether they change that more in the Crown Tundra, but wow. DLC 1, which is the Owl Armor. Short story, it wasn't fulfilling though. Pokemon introduced like Urshifu. Goodness gracious, that Mon is busted. I mean, not single strike, not rapid strike. We ended up getting some pretty busted Pokemon. A lot of Pokemon got new moves, and I always love seeing that. Some of them might be a bit too much for a metagame to handle. And good riddance to some of them that got banned in Smogon and VGC. However, the DLC one, not a really good story. Some interesting character development for your rival, quote unquote, which was either Avery or Kiara. And yeah, I think that's all. DLC 1 area map was pretty fulfilling in regards to the areas. They actually have very interesting features. It's not like you're walking into a sandstorm right away, or you're not walking to rain or any weather-based biomes, because they actually felt like they were connected compared to the wild area. And now we're gonna get into why the games were meh. The story was utter trash. I cannot believe this story, The Darkest Day, was supposed to be all hype, and it was still garbage. Booty juice, dookie on the ground, dick on the ground, chote on the road. It was a horrible story. Unbelievable. Dynamax, while it's a good mechanic, it's busted. It doesn't make anything competitive, except unless you're playing doubles. But singles, man, Jesus Christ, Dynamax is a very broken mechanic, and I wish they brought back Megas and not Z moves. Why did you get rid of Megas? Dynamax just made things worse. My quote-unquote rival, Hop, pretty good character development. I'll give him that. Champion Leon, pretty good. I think he's a pretty good character. Sword and Shield, the area of Sword and Shield was man, there's a lot of hallway corridor kind of thing. And what I mean by that is like you're going to one place to another without backtracking or even going to different routes. It's a hallway game corridor, people like to call it, and I definitely am not a fan of that. Um, in terms of cutting Pokemon, I'm okay with it, but I do feel like because of that, the consequence of having a limited Pokedex made metagames in VGC and in singles just very stale. You'll see the top 10, 15 Pokemon over and over. There is no, especially with Dynamax. Oh, good lord. Especially when Dynamax was around. Wow. Ditto was everywhere. Gyarados everywhere. Hawlucha everywhere. Oh my goodness. Dragapult, Togekiss with weakness policy. Excadrill, Tyranitar, Rhyperior. Oh my goodness. These Pokemon were just everywhere. Everywhere. A limited dex meant a limited metagame. And last but not least, with Sword and Shield, you gotta pay for home. $16, which obviously people like me, like, that's nothing. That's hardly anything. But for some people who are, especially kids, who want to get their Pokemon back from Pokebang, it's a somewhat tedious process. And yikes, I think they kind of mishandled Pokemon Home. And this is the generation where the criticism was at its height because people were tired of seeing Generation 6. People definitely had some things to say about Generation 7. And I think Generation 8 was when the pot was boiling and it spilled over and everyone's mad. So that's pretty much my tier list. Holy crap, it was 36 minutes long. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. But anyways, guys, if you guys have any remarks, let me know. Go ahead and type your comments down below. Like this video if you guys enjoyed it, and it's a bit longer than usual. I know, I'm sorry, but I have to explain everything. Um, I hope that Crown Tundra solves the issues of Sword and Shield. Maybe I can put these up to good, but they're kind of meh right now. Um, I think for sure my amazing tier is like solidified. Well, there might be some debatable things in good and meh. I think bad or I think bad is like bad, overall. I think they're like I think amazing and bad are like set forth general consensus just because of what these brought to the Pokemon franchise. By the way, for games like Sword and Shield, first gen on the Switch, definitely did not have a good start. So that's why I'm putting them in man as well. So hope you guys enjoyed this video. It's your boy Franklin signing out. Hopefully I get to drop more videos when Crown Tundra drops. So peace. See ya.